Have you ever missed a time in your life that you know was actually painful? Maybe a relationship that exhausted you, a stressful period at school, a job that made you anxious every morning, and yet something about it still pulls at you. You find yourself remembering it late at night, not the arguments, not the stress, but the feeling of being there. And quietly you wonder, why do I miss something that once hurt me? Because the answer isn't about weakness. It's about the strange way your brain edits memory and what it chooses to keep and what it slowly lets fade away. Nostalgia often arrives without warning. A song plays, a smell appears, a photo resurfaces on your phone. Suddenly you're transported somewhere else, a past version of your life. You remember the place, the people, the atmosphere. But something curious happens. The memory feels warm, even if the reality back then wasn't. Maybe that time included loneliness. Maybe the relationship ended painfully. Maybe you felt lost and uncertain. But your mind doesn't replay the entire experience. It highlights certain fragments, the late-night conversations, the quiet walks, the feeling of being younger before life became complicated. This selective remembering can feel confusing. You might even question yourself, why do I miss something that caused me pain? Psychologists call this phenomenon rosy retrospection, the brain's tendency to remember the past as slightly better than it actually was. But nostalgia isn't simply a mistake in memory. It serves a psychological purpose. In fact, the mind uses nostalgia in a very specific way, and understanding that purpose changes how these memories feel. When people feel nostalgic for painful periods, they often assume something is wrong. Maybe they think they're romanticizing the past or struggling to move on. But nostalgia isn't simply longing. It's a regulation tool the brain uses to stabilize emotion. In personality psychology, nostalgia is linked to something called self-continuity, the sense that your past, present, and future are connected parts of the same story. When life feels uncertain, the brain often reaches backwards, not to relive pain, but to reconnect with identity. Think about it. Even difficult chapters of life still contain meaning. They contain growth, moments that shaped who you became. So when your mind revisits those times, it isn't necessarily wishing to return. It's searching for something familiar, a reminder of who you were and how far you've come. But this still leaves an interesting question. If nostalgia helps us emotionally, why does the brain filter out so much of the pain? To answer that, we need to look at how memory actually works. Memory doesn't function like a video recording. It works more like a story editor. Every time you recall an event, the brain reconstructs it. The hippocampus retrieves details, the prefrontal cortex organizes the narrative, and the emotional centers, like the amygdala, adjust how the memory feels. Over time, the brain begins compressing experiences. The sharp edges soften, the emotional peaks remain. Psychologists call this memory reconsolidation. Each time you revisit a memory, the brain subtly rewrites it. Here's a simple mental model. Imagine your past as a long movie, but your brain keeps only a few scenes, the ones that hold emotional meaning. And slowly, the uncomfortable scenes fade into the background. Why does this happen? Because the brain prioritizes emotional survival. If every painful detail remained vivid forever, the mind would struggle to move forward. So, memory becomes selective. It protects you by editing the story, keeping meaning while reducing suffering. But nostalgia does something else too. It activates reward systems in the brain. Studies show nostalgic memories trigger dopamine and oxytocin responses. These chemicals are linked to warmth, connection, and belonging. So, when you revisit the past, the brain gives you a small emotional reward. Not because the past was perfect, but because remembering it helps you feel anchored. Still, nostalgia can sometimes become a trap, which leads to an important question. How do you honor the past without getting stuck inside it? 1. Recognize the memory filter. The first step is understanding that nostalgia is edited memory, not deception, just compression. What to do? When a nostalgic memory appears, gently ask, what parts of this experience am I not remembering? Why it works. This activates the prefrontal cortex, which helps balance emotional recall with realistic context. Example: if you miss an old relationship, remember both the beautiful moments and the difficulties. The full picture reduces emotional distortion. 2. Identify what you actually miss. Often, we don't miss the situation, we miss the feeling associated with it. Freedom, connection, simplicity. What to do? Ask yourself, what emotion from that time do I want again? Why it works. The brain shifts from past-focused longing to present-focused possibility. Example: you might think you miss your university years, but what you truly miss is curiosity and exploration. Those feelings can still exist today. 3. Transform nostalgia into gratitude. Instead of seeing nostalgia as loss, treat it as evidence that something meaningful existed. What to do? When a memory appears, mentally say, I'm grateful this was part of my life. Why it works. Gratitude activates neural circuits linked to emotional regulation and well-being. Example: instead of feeling sad about a past friendship fading, appreciate that it once shaped your life. Here's the simple mental model to remember. Your brain treats the past like a photo album, but it doesn't keep every picture. It keeps the ones that mean something. Over time, the album becomes softer, the harsh lighting fades, the important moments remain. Nostalgia is the feeling of flipping through that album, not to return, but to remember the path that brought you here. The past becomes less about what was lost and more about what shaped you. And once you see it that way, nostalgia stops feeling like sadness. It becomes something quieter, a form of emotional continuity. If you sometimes miss times that were difficult, you're not strange, you're remembering. Your mind is revisiting chapters that helped build who you are, not because they were perfect, but because they mattered. Life moves forward. People change. Places disappear. But meaning doesn't vanish so easily. It stays in small fragments, a song, a street, a memory that surfaces unexpectedly. And maybe nostalgia isn't asking you to return to the past. Maybe it's simply reminding you that every moment you're living right now will one day become a memory too. And perhaps the quiet invitation is this: to live in a way that the future version of you will remember with the same gentle warmth.